Imagine this scenario. A dangerous criminal, convicted to execution, is forced by the government to test an experimental drug that suppresses his violent impulses. He manages to escape from the lab, but he quickly realizes that he is a different person now, unable to commit violent acts. Nevertheless, his past catches up with him in the most unexpected ways. A man covered in tattoos lies on the bed. His name is Lee Ray Oliver. He's a criminal who is about to be executed by lethal injection. Even in the last moments of his life, he defiantly curses the government and the people in the audience watching. They yell back in rage. The end is near. Lee, horrified by the prospect of losing his life, intensely looks at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable. The injection begins. As poison fills his veins, Lee reminisces about his childhood. His mother didn't love him, and he was heavily bullied by other children. After his mother's demise, his uncle, a sadistic, cruel man, did unspeakable things to Lee and his brother. So, naturally, he grew up bitter and resentful toward the world, and let his frustration out the only way he knew, through violence, leading him to a life of crime. Sometime later, Lee's body is delivered to a morgue where it turns out he's alive. He opens his eyes, confused about what is happening. Dr. Michael Copeland, a neuropharmacologist, explains to Lee that he has only been sedated during the procedure to create the appearance of his demise. Lee demands to know what is going on. Michael and the rest explain to him that he has a choice. He can continue his life by participating in a secret medical research project, testing an experimental drug with potentially serious or fatal side effects, or the real execution can happen right now. Amused by the prospect of being their guinea pig, Lee initially refuses. Michael tries to convince him otherwise, saying he can repay his debt to society, but this statement only angers him further. A man with a needle approaches. At the last possible moment, Lee asks them to stop. He reluctantly agrees to participate in the research. Meanwhile, a Russian mobster, Dimi Vertov, an old enemy of Lee, brutally interrogates the prison warden, who approached him with an offer to find out where Lee will be held during the research, for a price. Vertov threatens his life and orders him to get that information for free and very fast. Before taking the drug, Lee demands to know what the medication will do to him. Michael, being the creator of Anagres, which is the name of the drug, explains that it alters brain chemistry and suppresses violent tendencies, effectively turning a violent criminal like Lee into a compassionate person who has a sense of right and wrong and can feel remorse. Lee, amused by this notion, makes jokes and laughs. His demeanor changes rather quickly when Michael informs him that the experiment will never be over. He will spend the rest of his unnatural life being the subject of study. Lee reluctantly takes a pill. From now on, he will take a pill just like that every 6 hours. Michael meets his friend Pete at soccer practice. They watch Pete's son as he plays, while Michael reminisces about his own son, who used to play with this team, but tragically passed away years ago. 2 days go by, and the scientists are amazed to see that Lee is behaving calmly and cooperating, so they decide to remove the last of his restraints. But it turns out he was faking it all along. He suddenly attacks the guards and attempts to escape. Michael chases him. Lee runs through the corridors but faces a dead end. Nevertheless, he knocks down the guards and continues his escape. Surrounded by guards, Lee jumps through a window and continues running outside the facility as guards follow him into a corner. He tries to climb the fence but is quickly tased by one of the guards, ending his futile attempt at escape. Despite the aggression from Lee, Michael is thrilled by what happened, as Lee is clearly a perfect subject for his research. At his house, Michael is visited by his ex-wife Barbara, who came by to take the dog. She is concerned that Michael would visit a soccer practice, unable to let go of the traumatic memory of their lost child. His current girlfriend, Eden Ross, is jealous of their relationship and expresses affection for Michael. In the research facility, Lee wakes up in a locked room with a transparent mirror. He is enraged to find out that they got rid of his facial hair and some of his tattoos. Michael, on the microphone, informs him that it's just the beginning. They're going to erase his criminal past. Instructed by Michael, Lee reluctantly takes another pill. Sometime later, in one of the tests, Lee has to play a violent video game with a toy pistol, while his reactions are monitored through the sensors attached to his body. The scientists closely watch the data, pointing out that judging by their readings, Lee feels no remorse whatsoever. In fact, he laughs and enjoys shooting virtual people as much as he did the real ones. By the way, guys, this movie came out in 2004. Don't you think this game looks a bit outdated for that year? The scientists increase the difficulty, and Lee gets increasingly agitated by the faster speed of the game. He yells in frustration, telling them to slow it down. They don't, and he loses the game. It enrages Lee. He throws the chair and destroys the TV. He continues destroying the objects around him and yelling at the scientists as policemen try to calm him down. Sometime later, Michael tests Lee's reaction to the images of his victims. It turns out that Lee was sentenced to lethal injection for shooting Nikolai Vertov, a nephew of the reputed Russian mobster, Dimi Vertov. Michael then shows Lee a picture of his former cellmate, who was brutally stabbed by Lee, but he explains that it was self-defense as the cellmate tried to assassinate him to get paid by the Russians who put a contract on him. Michael then shows a picture of Gary Caputo, an innocent bystander that Lee shot while exiting Nikolai's place, causing the man to become mentally disabled. This particular picture causes a minor reaction in his brain, almost a sense of remorse. Michael continues asking Lee questions about his childhood, which angers him. Michael reminds him that the alternative is going back to prison and being executed. So, in the most aggressive manner, Lee reluctantly tells him about his dark past. Feeling guilty about the unfortunate shooting of Gary Caputo, Lee starts having nightmares about it. It's a clear sign that the drug is beginning to change him slowly. The next day, the scientists are surprised to see Lee in a good mood. Michael comes inside and they have a nice chat. But once again, it turns out he was faking it. He assaults Michael from behind and takes him hostage. The security guards follow them as they go downstairs. In the most unexpected manner, Michael sets himself free and starts viciously beating up Lee, to the point where security guards have to take him away from the prisoner. Lee happily points out that Michael is just as violent as he is, despite his pretense. Getting tired of the obnoxious criminal, Michael orders his subordinates to triple the dosage. Sometime later, Michael attends a reception held by his company, where he is praised for his hard work by his colleague, Dr. Arlo Penner. In the research facility, Lee is quite demoralized by having to take the pills. In one of the unannounced tests, a scientist brings him food and pretends to accidentally drop it at him, expecting a violent reaction. To his astonishment, Lee holds himself back from hitting the man. Lee's nightmares are getting worse. His newly awakened conscience bothers him about his deeds. One night, Michael is awakened by a phone call in the middle of the night. Security urgently calls him back to the research facility. It's Lee. He is weeping uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the feeling of guilt caused by the memory of shooting Gary Caputo, replaying in his head over and over again. Michael, fascinated by this development, comforts Lee, who continues telling him that after the shooting, he felt great and made jokes about it, even bragged about it to other prisoners. Now, he is disgusted with himself for that. Lee is in great pain. He can't sleep. Michael assures him they will work on that. Michael, overjoyed with this tremendous achievement, orders his subordinates to give Lee insomnia pills when he can't sleep. Michael informs Arlo about the recent development and wants them to start Phase 2, reintroducing the subject into society. Michael and Lee take a ride. Lee is amazed to discover that everyone is carrying a cell phone, unlike when he was put in prison many years ago. They put an electronic bracelet on Lee's leg to track him and drive him to his new apartment. Lee is given a new identity, Joe Monroe, and a small sum of money. He is expected to continue taking the medication, get a job, and live legitimately from now on, as the government will keep a close look at his affairs. Lee looks out the window and spots the henchman of Dimi Vertov. Michael wishes him good luck and leaves. Later, scientists observe Lee through multiple surveillance devices installed in the apartment. Lee leaves the building and goes for a walk as Michael and his crew continue watching him. He tries to get a job, but things don't go well for him. Lee then makes some calls to his former associates trying to get a gun and continues walking to a car wash looking for a job. A woman calls him inside and gives him an application paper. Her name is Teresa. They get acquainted and immediately like each other. The manager talks to Lee and is convinced he will fit right in. He's hired. Later that day, Lee goes to a supermarket to meet a guy sent by his former associates. The man sells him a gun, a .38 revolver. As Lee leaves the supermarket with groceries, the government black van continues following him around. In the apartment, Lee tries to find the hidden surveillance devices, correctly assuming the government put them there. He waves to the government watching him, signaling to them he knows their secret. During nighttime, Lee can't sleep, so he checks if the black van is still out there and writes something on a piece of paper to show it to the camera. He is asking for insomnia pills. An agent from the van comes to deliver the pills to Lee. Trying to escape from the government, Lee covertly puts the sleeping pills in a beer bottle and offers the agent to have some beer together. They talk, and the agent takes a beer with him to the van where he falls asleep from the pills in the beer, giving Lee a chance to flee. Meanwhile, Vertov's henchman approaches the building. Seeing Lee getting out, he hides against the wall and then follows him. The other agent in the van is alarmed by the beeping sound. He looks at the monitor and sees that Lee is escaping, so he rushes to intercept. Lee arrives at the train station and gets on the train. The henchman follows him inside, but the agent is too late. He informs Michael that Lee has escaped. They get in the car and follow the GPS signal of the bracelet. The train is heading to Davenport, Iowa. Michael deduces that Lee is going there because Gary Caputo and his brother live there. In Davenport, Lee reaches the address of Gary Caputo and knocks on the door. It is open, so he goes inside. Gary, being mentally disabled after the shooting, sits in front of the TV and laughs, unconcerned about the stranger walking inside his house. Lee introduces himself as Joe, saying he will be his new friend. Gary doesn't recognize him, of course, but cheerfully greets him in his house. Overwhelmed by remorse and barely able to hold back tears, Lee tells Gary that the people who did this to him are very sorry about what happened. Gary replies that, "It's okay, it's fine." Lee gives him some candy and tells him he will do anything he wants. Gary's brother arrives, so Lee quickly leaves through the back door. Bill, Gary's brother, spots him anyway. He doesn't recognize him at first, but still gets suspicious about the strange man who would meet his brother behind his back. Bill seems inappropriately hostile toward his brother, not caring at all about his disability. He finds the receipt in the bag Lee gave Gary earlier. The address on the receipt makes him remember who Lee is. Meanwhile, Lee is attacked by the Russian henchman. He runs away as the henchman desperately tries to gun him down. He misses again and again as Lee runs further into the forest. Lee manages to ambush the henchman and pulls a gun on him. He lets him live and tells him to send Vertov a message. He's a different person now and wants to be left alone. Trying to bury his past, Lee throws away the revolver and the henchman's gun. He is soon intercepted by the government agents and Michael, who followed his GPS signal. They take him at gunpoint. Lee tells Michael that he didn't try to escape. He only needed to see Gary and apologize for what he had done to him. Michael isn't happy, but he accepts Lee's explanation. Following his suspicion, Bill finds an old picture of Lee and identifies him as the man who was near his house. He now knows the truth about Lee's fake execution. Arlo is dissatisfied with what happened, but Michael manages to convince him that they need to continue the experiment. At the car wash, things are going great. Lee is good at his job, and he becomes good friends with Teresa as they continue working together. It turns out she is a college student at a community college studying geology. They have a nice talk inside the car that goes through a car wash. Teresa finds the experience relaxing. The two are drawn to each other and almost start kissing before they exit the car, fearing that the manager will see them. Bill goes to the supermarket from the receipt he retrieved earlier. The store employees don't recognize him, so Bill continues to look elsewhere. One night, Lee walks the streets. Michael spots him and offers to give him a ride home. Lee takes interest in his personal life, so Michael reluctantly reveals that he and his wife split up after he lost his 8-year-old son under tragic circumstances. They were driving, and Michael must have insulted one of the irresponsible drivers with his gestures, so the crazy maniac pulled out a gun and opened fire, taking the life of his son. Lee now understands why he tries to change people with his medication. Bill continues looking for Lee. He randomly goes to a car wash, presumably to buy something, and accidentally spots Lee and Teresa leaving in a car. He hides his face from Lee and goes inside to talk to the manager. He shows the manager Lee's mugshot and reveals to him that his employee is a dangerous criminal who shot his brother. Lee and Teresa enjoy the swing ride in the amusement park. They go on the bumper cars ride afterwards. Bill approaches them and yells his real name, Lee Ray, alerting Lee that someone has recognized him. Bill quickly leaves so Lee couldn't see who yelled at him. Lee and Teresa continue having a good time, but he suddenly spots the Russian henchman behind him and tells her to go on the ride without him. The henchman catches up with Lee and a fight ensues. He manages to knock down the henchman and runs away. Lee desperately tries to lose the Russian in the amusement park. He catches up with him and opens fire, but misses. Security guards approach them, so the henchman reluctantly leaves the scene. Lee meets up with Teresa and they drive to her place. The black van with government agents continues to follow them. In her apartment, attracted to each other, they start kissing. Embarrassed by his electronic bracelet, Lee stops. He says goodbye to Teresa and leaves. Lee walks the streets followed by the agents in the black van. He enters the building where he lives and tries to open the apartment when he is suddenly taken hostage by Bill, who got his address from the car wash manager. One of the agents watching the surveillance footage of the apartment gets suspicious when Lee doesn't show up inside and goes to check it out. Bill keeps a gun pointed at Lee and escorts him to his car. The agent yells at Bill to drop his gun. He turns around and shoots the agent. He then knocks Lee unconscious and puts him in the back of his car. Bill notices the electronic bracelet on Lee's leg. He quickly gets a bolt cutter and removes the bracelet, leaving no way for the agents to follow Lee. Agents in the black van arrive at the scene and surprisingly dismiss Bill's car that almost hit them. They then spot the deceased agent lying near the building, assuming Lee did it to him. Michael is informed about the incident. At the scene, he still argues that it couldn't have been Lee, as he was making progress, but the government agents now believe that somehow Lee was faking his test results, and he is still a violent psychopath. Arlo agrees with that assessment. They will hunt down Lee and eliminate him. Meanwhile, Bill delivers Lee to his place. He is enraged and tries to force Lee to confess about how he faked the execution. Gary comes in, cheerful about meeting his friend Joe, unable to understand why Bill threatens him with a gun. Lee tries to apologize, but it only angers Bill further because he remembers the execution very well. He was there, in the audience, witnessing Lee cursing them. He didn't have any remorse whatsoever back then, so naturally Bill doesn't believe him. He forces Lee to confess to Gary about what he did to him. Unable to hold back his tears from remorse, Lee graphically describes the details of the shooting. Bill gets ready to finish Lee. Seeing this, Gary attacks his brother, making him lose the gun. Lee takes the gun and runs away. Lee calls Michael from the payphone and tells him that Bill Caputo shot the agent and kidnapped him afterwards. Michael doesn't believe him, but being emotionally attached to Lee, he reluctantly agrees to bring Lee his medicine. Seeing Michael rushing to his car, the agents decide to follow him. They have deduced from previous interactions that Michael got attached to Lee and would go behind their backs to help him. The Russian henchman watches all this and follows them as well. Michael spots the black van following him, so at the last moment he aborts the meeting as a confused Lee watches him drive away with the black van following right behind him. Lee gets out of the bushes and walks to the hospital. The Russian henchman follows him. In the hospital, Lee goes to the dispensary and attempts to get some Anagrez, the experimental drug he was given by Michael and his staff, but the clerk has never heard of this drug. Enraged, Lee goes inside and threatens him with a gun in the most deranged manner. The clerk hides in the corner as Lee desperately looks for the medicine by himself. He keeps yelling at the clerk. Suddenly, the Russian henchman comes inside and accidentally shoots the clerk while aiming at Lee. Lee shoots back and a fierce firefight ensues, as both frantically shoot at each other. Lee walks to the back and creates a diversion by pushing the storage shelves. The henchman gets distracted, and Lee uses the moment to gun him down. Having nowhere to go, Lee tries to get some help from Teresa. The manager told her the truth, so she is reluctant to help the dangerous criminal Lee turned out to be. He manages to convince her that he is a different person now, so she lets him inside. The government agents go inside the building. They knock on Teresa's door. She tries to stall them, but they kick the door and force their way inside. Lee is nowhere to be found, so they leave in a hurry without even bothering to explain themselves to Teresa. Michael tells Barbara how disappointed he is in what has happened lately. Suddenly, Lee walks inside their house and points his gun at Michael. Agitated by having to run for his life, he demands Michael give him his pills. Michael assures Lee that he believes him about the earlier shooting and will happily give him the pills if he lets Barbara go. Lee lets her go, and they proceed to Michael's office. He has only a scarce supply of Anagrez, so he calls Eden and asks her to bring the entire supply of the drug to his house. It turns out Eden has betrayed Michael. She tells Arlo about Michael's request. Government agents are on their way to apprehend Michael and Lee in the house. Someone rings the doorbell. It's Arlo and the agents. Michael claims he doesn't know where Lee is. He still tries to convince Arlo that Lee didn't shoot the agent. Bill Caputo did. In the most unexpected twist, Arlo informs Michael that all this time, Lee was in a group of subjects that were given a placebo. The subjects that received the actual drug lost their lives to liver failure. The drug didn't do anything. It was the counseling from Michael and Lee's genuine desire to change his life that contributed to his seemingly magical transformation. Michael is shocked by the revelation. Barbara calls the house, and he covertly tells her to call the police. Michael excuses himself to go have a drink. In reality, he goes to see Lee, and they leave. Arlo, expecting the deception, quickly discovers that Michael left the house, presumably with Lee. Arlo and the agents sit in their cars and follow Lee and Michael as they flee. Michael intends to put Lee on the first flight at the airport. He further reveals to Lee that he doesn't need any pills. They were placebo. The agents eventually get closer to Michael's car, and an engaging car chase ensues as they try to ram him off the road. Unable to do so, they open fire instead, distracting Michael. He eventually loses control and drives right into the lake. Trapped underwater, Lee quickly frees Michael, who struggles with his seatbelt, after which they leave the car and swim to the surface. Once out of the water, Michael gives Lee some money and tells him to get to the airport. He thanks the doctor for changing his life, and they bid farewell. Only seconds later, without any warning, one of the agents shoots Lee multiple times as the heartbroken Michael yells for them to stop. He looks at Lee as he struggles to remain conscious. Meanwhile, the police arrive and arrest Arlo and the agents for the clearly illegal actions they were involved in. In the last moments of his life, Lee's life is flashing before his eyes. Sometime later, Michael and Barbara open a youth center, trying to help kids with problems to have a better life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.